of in a different context. You know, the recordings, it's a little, I feel that term's a little reductive and kind of feels like it's just stuck in how the albums were released in the 70s. But now it's like we got Homegrown, and the archives show like how all these like albums were kind of comprised from various different sessions. So this kind of narrative that he just like recorded these like 3 dark albums after Harvest, it's more complicated and nuanced than that. And that's essentially what the video gets into. The video gets into like how nuanced and complicated Neil Young's recording was in the mid-70s. It's a lot like Prince in the mid-80s during this whole like Crystal Ball, Sign of the Times period. He was just, Neil Young was so prolific. I mean, he's generally prolific throughout his whole career, but in the mid-70s, like from 72 to like 77, he was like recording like 3 albums worth of material a year. Like, you know, it was crazy. And so I try to kind of break it all down in that video. And as a result, I mean, I've been into Neil Young since I was a teenager. He's always been one of my favorite artists. But I just like, it was like, it's one of those artists, like if you haven't listened to them in a while, and then it's like a whole new love affair again. It's like, it's like, so I just been diving deep, and I was like, especially a friend of mine, Samuel Wetz, he hooked me up with the archives, volume 2, which I didn't have. So I've just been diving into them, and there's so much great material. So if you're a Neil Young fan, man, this is a great time, because he's just like, he's releasing a lot of stuff that for years he was holding back. So it's just like, so it's a great time to be a Neil Young fan.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you mentioned those archives, because it was my birthday last week, and my wife gave me Neil Young Volume 2 archives. Volume 1 I've already had, but the Volume 2,
that's the one I'm talking
has
about.
a lot to do with what you were just saying, the 73 to 79 kind of era, and it's my favorite period of Neil Young. It
Same
really
here.
is.
That's definitely my favorite period. Tonight's the Night, Time Fades Away, On the Beach, that Zuma. Zuma. Those are all, and Homegrown too, which I think is an amazing album that was unreleased, but to me, it's like his blood on the tracks. It's an amazing album. And that whole period, that mid-70s period is great. But of course, like even afterwards, you got like one of my favorite albums is Rust Never Sleeps. And the one we're talking about, and of course you got Harvest and After the Gold Rush, and I mean you mentioned Andy Reactor. That's a really good album, and even in the '90s he had a really good run. I love
the '90s. He was wonderful.
Harvest Moon and Mirror Ball. I love Broken Arrow. That was really good.
That's a good record. I agree.
So much was going on, and even into the early 2000s with Silver and Gold was fantastic, and he really hasn't really stopped putting out really high quality albums.
I like Greendale. I thought was really great, and Chrome Dreams 2 I liked, and Psychedelic Bill I thought was a really good album.
That's a good album. A lot of jamming on that record.
That actually reminded me of this album that we're going to be talking about, Psychedelic Bill.
Psychedelic Pill starts off with that 23-minute opener. I mean, 23-minute opener, who does that?
I thought he's one of the few artists that could do a song like that. There's a few exceptions, but he's one of the few that it doesn't bore me. But that's also because, and I revealed this in that video, Neil Young's my second favorite guitarist. My favorite's Jimmy Page. But after Jimmy Page, I was thinking about, Neil Young is my second favorite guitarist. So I can listen to him solo for like 25 minutes and it doesn't bore me, because I just love his like jagged, intense soloing. To me, it's a lot like, I don't know, like it's like the rock and roll equivalent of like John Coltrane. You know, it's like there's just like so much feeling and emotion to how he plays as a guitarist. And this album, again, that we're talking about is kind of where that emerges. This is like where he already had the first album, the stuff with Buffalo Springfield. So as a songwriter, he had already kind of begun to emerge. But this is like, I feel like the album where Neil Young emerges as a electric lead guitarist, like fronting a hard rock band. Like he hadn't really done that before.
I would agree. You could always. Sorry, Andy. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say with the riffing and the solos. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say you could hear that lead approach in the early stuff with like Buffalo Springfield and just a bit, and you really wanted to hear that kind of approach later on, and we got it later on, like with this album we're going to talk about today. But you could hear that prominent style of playing, even with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. You could hear you always knew when he was playing, even though there was like several guitar players there. So he just had that excellent sound, and you always know when Neil Young's playing his guitar. So
yeah, like even if it's not his song, like the David Crosby song, one of my favorites, "Almost Cut Your My Hair."
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
yeah.
you could totally hear that's Neil soloing on that song. It's
Yeah.
like totally his style.
Yeah.
And that really is a good song. I like that song by them. So what have you been playing, Will?
Well, so like Eddie, I was listening to, of course, this week, and spinning my coffee, getting to know the record, revisiting all of that. But in addition to that, what I've been listening to lately is the new Mike Mangini record, Invisible Signs. So I don't know if everybody knows Dream Theater, but Mike Mangini is now the former drummer of Dream Theater. Mike Portnoy has been re-announced, coming back in. But Mike, and Al, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mike was a drummer for 5 or 6 records with Dream Theater.
Yeah, about that much, yeah.
About that much, yeah. But his new record, Invisible Signs, really, really good. Solo record. It might be his second one or first, I'm not sure. But you know who does there's some excellent musicians on there and some excellent music. Jen Matura, formerly of Evanescence, she does the vocals on this new record. And I think she might play guitar on one of the tracks. Like I said, I've just been recently introduced to it. It just literally came out a few weeks ago. Very good record. And then the other thing I've been listening to lately is a little bit of April Wine. With the sudden passing of Miles Goodwin. So I've been listening to Nature of the Beast and a couple other, April Wine classic records. And then more recently, of course, with Geddy Lee releasing his memoir, My Effin' Life. This is very cool. And Al, you're probably aware, as a Rush fan, the audiobook came with 2 lost tracks from the My Favorite Headache recording. So these are 2 sessions. So he released them as audio tracks, as like the last 2 chapters in the audio book, which is really cool. So I highly recommend the audio book. I've completed it. But the 2 songs are actually quite well produced. They re-recorded the drums for it, so because the original tracks had sort of a drum machine on it. So he partnered with a known drummer that he's worked with before, and Ben Mink, to do some mixing with it and some guitar work, and re-recorded those parts, put it together, and released it as audio tracks. So I've been listening to that as well. Al, I don't know if you've listened to the book or read the book, but it's highly recommended.
I have not yet, but that was going to be my pick for the what's spinning this week. Is the 2 new songs, the 2 new Geddy Lee songs.
Yeah,
been listening to them. Yeah, David Bottrell came in, and who produced Tool and helped Geddy produce the new 2 songs. I took him out of demo and re-recorded them, and I think the vocals are still original. And Ben Mink plays on it, of course, and drummer David Quentin Steinberg is the new drummer on there. He brought him in, did the drum tracks, and I like the new songs. I mean, I think maybe he left them off of My Favorite Headache because he didn't want the album to be too slow, because they're Gone is a bit more of a ballad, and then I Am You Are is a bit more, a little mid tempo, but it's still very like kind of mellow, And his singing is fantastic on it. I mean, I consider this like almost like the peak of his like kind of smoother vocal style. The 70s. 70s to the early 80s, he had the more the screeching, kind of over the top, vocal style that bothered a lot of people. But and then he started to kind of smooth that out into the 80s, and by this time when he got the solo album, I mean he's became such a fan of like vocalists. Yeah. He said, I remember in interviews that singer-songwriters and things like that he really kind of. I thought his vocals were fantastic on the album, so it's kind of continuation of that. And
I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like I know he released the songs on the audio book, and now he released it on YouTube and I guess streaming services. Mm-hmm. But I thought it would have made like a good record store day release if they would have.
Yeah, I did too.
Cool 45 with a nice cool cover or something. You know.
or even an EP. I was watching an interview today where Hugh Syme was involved in the design, and the guy that does the fan tune work for Rush, I forget his name, but the design, they went through about 6-7 designs, and then Getty signed off on the final design of the album cover. It would have made a great EP. It's beautiful artwork. And they were talking about with the song "Gone." Was it "Gone"?
Yeah.
Like where he was at that point. It was about Neil, and they were in that mindset because they had just been through and were still dealing with the tragedies of Neil.
Yeah, his tragedies.
Yeah. So they were in that mindset. But I agree with you. It's a softer. It's a softer range for him in the singing range, and it's nice. It's a beautiful song. They're both really good songs. I can see why they weren't necessarily put on the record, but because the record seemed to be a little more upscale in that sense. It had its softer pieces like "Still" and a few other bits, right? But overall, I'm really impressed, and I agree with you. It would have made a great EP with that artwork. It's just beautiful. So maybe that'll come down the road. I don't know, but. Yeah,
I can see it hopefully getting a vinyl release or something like that, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It would be a beautiful piece to have. I got one other record to tell you guys about. Go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. Finish up.
No, I was going to say I picked up this record just recently. I bought it called "Why Don't You?" Have you heard of this? It's with Leslie West, and it's 70s. Jack Bruce on bass, Corky Lang on drums, and Leslie West on guitar. And it's all blues rock from 72. It's a Pittman pressing, if that means anything to anybody, but excellent record. So I recorded both sides and posted it on my YouTube page. This is really, really good. It's almost like Mountain Light. It has a mountain sound, and Leslie West does most of the vocals, not all. But the musicianship, oh my God, the three guys together is just incredible.
So it's West, Bruce, and Lang?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you probably heard.
I got that album.
Do you have that? Yeah.
I haven't heard it, but I like mountains, so I should check that out.
Check that out for sure. That's on my page too, and I'll have to get your YouTube page, Eddie, as well.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
So go ahead, Al.
Yeah. So in addition to the two Getty Lee tracks, because of Miles Goodwin passed away from April Wine, I've been spinning Harder, Faster. One of my favorite albums by them. I posted up on my page their song "I Like to Rock." I love that song. I love it's filmed in the studio where all the famous Rush videos were filmed. It's a beautiful studio. They kind of considered it the Canadian equivalent of like Abbey Road. Like they would, they Rush kind of made it like their second home. You can go there, and they have quarters there where you could stay, and it's on a lake, and it's just such a beautiful. It was a beautiful. It's been since knocked down. I mean, it was in ruins for a lot of years, but yeah, I Like the Rock video by April Wine was filmed in that same studio. They do a cover of 21st Century Schizoid Man by ELP on here, which is really cool. So yeah, Miles Goodwin, man. I mean, I never got to see them live, but I worked at a pizzeria where my boss was Canadian, and he used to play a lot of Canadian rock and stuff like that. Bands I never heard or very rarely heard. And April Wine was one of them, and stuff like that. So I mean, he introduced me to a lot of cool stuff. And so rest in peace to him. And then and then in preparation for this episode, I've been spinning the Neil Young, and I don't have a vinyl copy of that. I just been streaming it. I know I have a CD copy of it, but it's put away in storage. So I was it'd be an exercise in futility to try to get it out of storage right now. But because I have so much shit in there. But anyway, but I forgot how great of an album this was, man. I mean, just like listening to it, I'm like, holy shit, I hadn't listened to it in a long time, and it's just one of his best in my opinion, man.
Yeah, it really is.
It sounds so good. I gotta say, I have CD and vinyl, and obviously digital. Everybody's got digital, but my original copy here, I think I bought it when I was like 16, 17. And Canadian, obviously, it's got a Canadian flag on the back, but it still sounds amazing. Like it's just, oh my God! I cranked it up this week a couple times, and I think this is my second Neil Young album. My first introduction was Decade. I had Decade on which is a compilation, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, I
done
had
so
that
much
for a
of
long
his career.
Yeah, Decade.
Yeah.
It was almost too good. It was a little like the Rolling Stones Hot Rocks. It was one of those compilations that was so perfect and comprehensive.
It almost makes you not want to even like go out and
Yeah.
get.
I wrongly thought, and it was the same thing with Hot Rocks. It made me think, oh, well, I don't need any more Neil Young to this because it's perfect. Like, it's funny. The Beatles with the Blue and Red albums, the Blue album, I kind of felt like as soon as I heard it, like I'm missing out on some things.
Yeah.
Like you could just tell because the production was even so different from Sgt. Pepper to White Album. Like you felt like, yeah, this is a band I should listen to the albums from.
Mm-hmm.
But the Stones and Neil Young didn't feel like that to me, and I was wrong, obviously. But when I listened to those albums for years, that's all I had. I think I also had Harvest Moon and Unplugged because that was like when I got into it, like in the early 90s.
Yeah.
But in terms of his old stuff, for a long time, it was just Decade. And Decade is one of the great compilations, but you got to get, but once I started, it was like a few years later, once I started diving into the albums, and this of course had like, the three big songs were on Decade. So this was fairly well represented on Decade.
Yeah.
I would say this probably is like third. I would say this is, I don't know about the charts, but I can't imagine this isn't his third biggest album after Harvest and after the Gold Rush. I mean, it has three big classic rock radio staples. And so I don't know. I feel like if people went to one after those two albums, it would be this one. I think maybe. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I would say with like radio. If I think about radio, at least in Canada at that time, 3-minute songs you were guaranteed. If it was a good song like "Cinnamon Girl," I'll use that as an example. That's a perfect song. It still gets airplay today on all the rock stations. I'm assuming in the U.S. as well. You hear it all the time, right? So it was
in the U.S. you heard "Cinnamon Girl," but even on like rock radio, I grew up in Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia, WMMR. They always played "Down by the River" and "Cowgirl in the Sand." You heard those songs a lot too.
Yeah, see, that's cool because you don't, back in the day in the rock stations here in Toronto, you wouldn't hear a 20-minute piece like that. Occasionally, if it was a special show or like a profile of an artist or something like that, they would play that, but it wasn't often. In Canada, they had this real the CRTC Commission, the Radio and Television Commission. They had a real thing about Canadian content and 3-minute songs. So songs that had to be quick plays, big hits, and that's why some longer songs like Rush, Spirit of Radio, it's about 5 minutes. There was an edited version, so for radio play, and that's why a lot of bands at that time, 70s and 80s, at least here, would do these radio edits as well. But to answer your question, I think this album, this Neil Young album, is just great. It was actually my second after I explored Neil for a couple of years with Decade. I think this is my first LP I bought of his, and it's a regular one I go to all the time. I'll play it at least once a year or so because it just sounds so good.
Yeah, this was one of the earlier ones I got, obviously, because it was well represented on Decade, and especially when you're younger, it's like one of the more hard rocking ones. Yeah. So I might got Harvest as well. It was like and after the Gold Rush, I got all the basics. I think, and then Rust Never Sleeps, and eventually you start branching out, and just like going down the rabbit hole. But yeah, this was definitely one of the earlier ones I got. And actually kind of like Al, that's the thing. In a way, I was kind of neglecting it for a few years because I kind of burned it out a little bit when I was younger. So like Led Zeppelin 4 or like Paranoid, it was just like an album I listened to a lot as a teenager, and young adult. So by the time, I'm in my 40s, I was like, I hadn't actually listened to it for a few years, even though there were a lot of Neil Young albums I would still listen to, but this wasn't like a go-to Neil Young album for me anymore. But like I said, I mentioned it briefly, even though it's not the era I'm discussing in this video I made, I do touch upon it. And I talked about this album and I decided that's the vinyl copy I have. I only got like the other week. So and listening to it, because I didn't have it on vinyl, that kind of just re-sparked my love for it again. That's a great thing too. If you haven't heard an album in a while and you get it on vinyl, it's like it's brand new for you again.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was listening to it the way I listened to it as like a teenager again, and I love it. Yeah, it's one of his best albums. It's amazing, and it's the one where it's the second album, but it's really like the first one. and it's a great. I love the first album, but there's still a lot of that Buffalo Springfield kind of hangover. That psychedelic pop, trying to be a little bit like the Beatles. And he totally shakes that off on this album, though. And this is like really the beginning of what he would be in the 70s and onward. It's like this is where he really defines himself with Crazy Horse and defines the kind of artist he'll be on his own, even.
Yeah. Right.
No,
so
very true.
Before we get to our countdown, what I've been spinning is Deep Purple's Perpendicular is what I've been listening to lately. Yeah. I got the because I really didn't have that much of their later stuff, and on Amazon they had a 3-pack of this one, Battle, A Rage in the Battle, I think it's something like that, and it was like the 3 after the Blue Light through the door.
House of Blue Light.
Yeah, it was the 3 after that. It came in.
I don't have any of the. I'm a big Deep Purple fan, but I don't have any after that Blue Light album. I don't have anything post that. But I have friends that tell me I should that I should dive into their later stuff. So I'm gonna make it a point to do that because
that's what I've been doing lately. So this is the first one with Steve Morse on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Richie left before this one, and Ian came back. For this one as well.
So you think it's pretty good? You think it's worth diving into the later stuff?
Yeah, and of course, you still have John Lord there.
Yeah.
Doing the keyboards, and that's a big part of it. So I've been listening to that. I got that one like last week, so I've been hearing a lot of that lately. I'm trying to get into it because I've been doing a lot of reading about it, and it's it kind of tells you as the listener to listen a little bit closer to Steve Morris's rhythm work, that there's a lot of changes. So that's what I've been trying to focus on. So today what we're going to be doing is ranking the tracks on Neil Young, Crazy Horse. Everybody knows this is Nowhere. So we'll start from your bottom, from your least favorite up to your very favorite, and we'll go around one at a time. So Eddie, what are you going to start off with? What is your least liked song on this album?
I didn't know the format. It's all right. I can improvise. And I know the album well enough to do this. So I didn't know we were doing it that way. But I can tell you, well, it's pretty easy. Even though I do like the song, I like every song on this album. I think it's great, perfect album. But if I had to pick a least favorite, I guess it would be kind of the odd duck here, Running Dry, Requiem for the Rockets. It's a cool song. I like it. It's a dark song, kind of a dark folk ballad with a violin. There's like a violin. Yeah. So it's a little unique. It actually reminds me of stuff Dylan would later do in the Desire album. That kind of wandering gypsy, the fiddle kind of sound that he has on Desire a few years later. And it's cool. I like it. It's a cool atmosphere, and it kind of like the sequencing is pretty good on this album. So I do like it, but it's like a kind of, this is what I'd call a straight up album track. Like it's a song like, I'm never going to want to listen to Running Dry on its own. Right. But as part of the album, the fabric of the album, it adds a little disconcerting note with the violin and stuff. It's a nice little texture, an added texture. And it sets up, the next song really well, Cowgirl in the Sand. So I definitely like in context of the album, but if I had to pick a least, it's Running Dry.
Yeah, man, that violin part is just fantastic. It's a really different way to play the violin on a rock album, and the violin playing the lead. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it has a really old time effect. I will say it just takes you. It has that. I don't know. Like I don't know
Transylvania
exactly but yeah, exactly. It almost feels like like Pioneer times or something, or even before that, right? So just I love the work on it. My number 7th was the third track on the first side, Round and Round. It won't be long, which also is, I've always been amazed with Neil's ability to write a story. And some of those stories, like this song, can be very depressing. And he's a master at, writing some very depressing songs and material. He's been quoted as commented on as being depressing and blah blah blah. We love Neil for what he is and being the artist that he is. So I love this song, and like Eddie said, I love this entire record. I love the way it flows. I think it's great that he opened with 2 harder tracks at the beginning of this record and then went into a softer piece. I like that format very much. It kind of takes you out of that, okay, it's not going to be not going to be a complete hard rock album. It's very much Neil. It's very solo, his way of doing things, obviously with Crazy Horse as well. It's just his style. And then it takes you out of that mindset of the first 2 right away into this softer piece, round and round, and but when I ranked my songs, and I had to go through these a couple times, that's where it fell in. It's my last choice. So still a good tune though.
Yeah, it is. Al, what are you going to start off with?
My number 7 is going to be The Losing End. Again, this whole album is damn good, man. So like picking a least favorite is kind of, it's kind of really, it's just a matter of like, really, which is your favorite? Because you don't really, I mean, I don't dislike any songs on here. So, but like, this song, it's got that sad, it's like a sad song. It kind of still makes you feel kind of happy. You know what I mean? It's, I don't know, man. I guess it's about like, I guess it's about finding out that somebody, that you were with or left you or something like that. I mean, lyric wise. And, but I mean, he goes ultra country on here, man. I mean, it's, I love the guitar. I love the solo, I love all that stuff, man. I mean, his playing is Crazy Horse was such a great kind of just yin and yang with him, man. I love the harmony vocals that Danny Whitten does with him, and I don't know, it's just, I like the song, but if I'm going to rank it, it's going to be number 7, man. That's my number 7. And Decade was the first compilation I had. So, I mean, this wasn't on Decade.
Right.
But, as we get to the other songs, I mean, the first thing I ever heard of Neil Young was my older brother had Live Rust on vinyl. So that was my introduction to him. And he loved that album, man. He would play that album over and over. So for the longest time, that's like the only Neil Young album I would hear, and then later on when I bought my own stuff, I got Decade. And, I had, like Eddie did, I had that for the longest time. I'm like, maybe I should start getting some more albums, like individual albums, because for the longest time, I was satisfied with that compilation. It was a great one, man. It covered all, Buffalo Springfield and all his eras, so, I ended up, kind of branching out from there. But it is a great compilation for somebody that doesn't have no Neil Young. You give them that, that's, even if they don't even go beyond that, I mean, it's got the cream of the crop really on it, man. So, but that's my number. But Losing Ends is my number 7. So,
I was gonna say, Al, you mentioned Live Rust. That's a kick-ass album. I know you've told me that story before. It was your brother's big record.
Yeah.
Live Rust and Rust Never Sleeps. Those 2 records. Live Rust. I hadn't heard it for many years, and I listened to. I had to drive 4 hours a few years ago for a funeral, and I needed some hard music on the way and the way back, and because it was a really heavy day, and that was the album I played like back to back, probably 3 or 4 times, each way, give or take. It was amazing. I remember that vividly. What a good record.
Yeah. Great version of Cinnamon Girl on that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I remember being really young with when I was really young, Like a Hurricane was like the song I really loved on that album.
Yeah, great version of that too. Yeah, amazing. One of the great live albums.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I was going to say, of course, I start off with Decade too, and just like Eddie was saying with the Rolling Stones, their Hot Rocks. I love compilations that go in order. I don't like the ones that are jumbled. I like the ones that they're sequenced in order that they were released, because you see the artist or the band change with times.
The evolution.
Do that. But I am going to start mine with Round and Round, and It Won't Be Long. I think it's a great song. I really like the harmonies on that, but it just goes a little bit too long for me. compared to everything else that's on this album. So I won't dwell on it too long, but round and round, it won't be long. Will be my number 7 on that.
Well, that's a damn great song too.
All right, Eddie, what's your next one?
My next one will be what Al picked for his last one, The Losing End, When You're On. But like Al said, it's even though this is my second, I guess, least favorite song, I love it. I think it's great. I mean, I love a lot of country too, especially 70s country, outlaw country. And yeah, this probably is the one that has the most, well, Round and Round's a little country too. But this one even more so, but there's some, that guitar playing is amazing that, Neil's doing. And it's a wonderful song. I just really love it. And the lyrics I really connect with. And now this is one I would like from this point on, every one of these songs I would listen to even out of context of the album. This is an amazing song, but there's just a bunch of other songs I love even more, but it's a really, really good country rock. I would call it a country rock ballad. And that's the thing, Neil Young, I guess, along with Bob Dylan during his period, John Wesley Harding, a year, actually like 2 years before this, kind of foreshadowed the early 70s kind of country rock boom, and, in Creedence a little bit as well. But, in the early 70s, you had, the early Eagles stuff and all that kind of stuff where, the country rock. So like songs like this, you kind of hear the influence they're shaping the sound of like the early 70s. And I think even for country music itself, like, Waylon and Willie and all those guys, they would kind of be changing their sound, affected by, I think, by what a lot of these other guys, these rock artists or folk rock artists were doing,
Yeah, exactly like the later Birds, the way that they were playing. And also, like you said, the Bob Dylan, the Nashville Skyline album.
Yep. Yeah, it's like there was a lot of hybrid, like, they were like, hey, let's bring the country and the rock together. They don't have to be apart, and Neil Young was furthering that with this album.
Yeah, and they kind of call that like outlaw country.
Yeah.
Whatever, but really it was just earthy. It was just a really good album. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. My number 6, Running Dry. Requiem for the Rockets. Again, it falls right in the middle of 3 tracks on side 2, and it's again takes you out of that first track, the country piece, Losing End, which, by the way, I like that song very much because I learned how to play it on guitar a number of years ago, so it's fun to sing. I change my voice and shit and have fun with it. But Running Dry, it's a softer, melodic, kind of depressing, not even depressing, I won't say depressing is the right word. It just feels like an older piece with the violin and everything. It's a long one too. It's over 5 minutes, kind of like Round and Round also. So I think it's interesting the way the record flows. You've got these 2 sides, and then you got these kind of obscure pieces, which is so Neil, right? But and then on side 2, you get into the much harder track at the end. Of course, we'll talk about that. But yeah, I agree. It when I did my out of 10 rating, it came in. I put a 7 out of 10 because I like it, because there's no bad Neil Young song really. Well, maybe 1 or 2. Let's be honest, but it's a number 6 for me. It's a number 6. So.
Al, which way are you going to go now?
My number 6, I'm going to the title track. Everyone knows This Is Nowhere. Again, I love the song, but in the context of. And again, like what Eddie said, man, I mean, when you listen to like these early albums of Neil Young and even later ones, Neil Young's is one of those artists where I tend to if I'm going to put on the album, I listen to the album start to finish. It's not like, I just kind of want to cherry pick this song here and there. For me, it doesn't work with him. And for me, he's an album guy. You know what I mean? And this album is meant to be listened to start to finish. And I think this is the second track on the album, I believe. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, like, I love the shared vocals with Danny Whitten. Like to me, my favorite Neil Young stuff is with Crazy Horse. That's my favorite stuff that he's done, I mean, growing up with the live Rust album, I mean, how could I, not, what I mean? So, I mean, they were just so down. And I saw Neil with Crazy Horse, gosh, probably like over 10 years ago now, probably 11 years ago. I saw him in Brooklyn, New York. and it was my only time I ever saw them. I seen Neil once before when he did the what was the festival that he would do?
Horde Festival?
What's that?
The Horde Festival?
No,
Farm Aid, was it Farm Aid or
Farm Aid? You do Farm. I saw one of the Farm Aids in 2000. It's probably like 2000, maybe 2006 or something like that. But that was only him acoustic. It was him and his wife, Peggy at the time. Okay. They're no longer together, but so really, like when I saw Neil full on with Crazy Horse, it was about. I mean, shit, it was already over 10 years ago. And in Brooklyn, New York, at a place called the Barclays Center Arena, and they just fucking it was just four guys on stage just jamming, dude. It was just like you just like look at it, it's just like no effects, no. It's just them on stage. I think the only straight stage probably he had this big like microphone on the stage, like an old school like microphone. And that was probably the only prop that he had on stage. But he didn't need anything else. He just did for him. It's the music talks, and it doesn't really need anything that really enhances it. It's just four guys on stage jamming. And but as far as the title track, it's got a country rock flavor to it, and great song. But I mean, in the context of the album, I'm going to put it number 6 because there's other songs I liked before it. So that's why I'm putting at 6. Great song, though. Great title track.
I am going to agree with Will on this one. It is going to be a running dry. It's going to be my number 6. I love the violin part at the end. I never realized it's an actually over 5-minute song. That's pretty amazing. There's a lot going on for a song that really sounds like a ballad, but he throws a lot of stuff in there. But that's going to be my number 6, and that's because I love so much more in front of it. So that's going to be mine. Is Running Dry. It's my number 6. All right, Eddie, which way are you going to go here?
All right, now listen, I don't want to make it sound like I'm against slower songs because all my slower songs are on the bottom. But so it's round and round. Now I'm getting around and round. Obviously, I like it a little bit better than you guys, just a little bit, because it's my favorite of the slow songs. But yeah, a lot of us will all kind of put in the slower songs. It's not, again, like we say, all these slow songs are great, and they enhance the harder rocking songs, and there are, I think, if anything, this is an area where Neil Young, I mean, with the hard rocking, he almost pretty much perfected it here on this album. He would, but the acoustic song, his acoustic side would get even better on subsequent albums, after Gold Rush, Harvest, Homegrown. I feel like he would be growing in that regard. He would continue to grow. But these are still great songs. And I think Round and Round, if anything, is probably the song, maybe not in terms of its production, but in the way that he's harmonizing with the woman Robin Lane, reminds me a little of how he harmonized with Linda Ronstadt on Harvest. Mm-hmm. And so this is probably like the first kind of little foreshadowing of this. And this was recorded before he did Helpless on Deja Vu. But it's a beautiful song. I love it. It's just a beautiful, rich country, like folk rock ballad. And it has a beautiful chorus. And I love how he's harmonizing with this Robin Lane woman. And it's a beautiful song. It's just a really beautiful song. And he's just really great with a melody, Neil Young. And I love it, and it's sequenced just where it should be, and it's great. There's just a couple more songs I love even more.
I think it would have sounded better on his debut album, though. It still has that
little
debut album feel to me.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a hangover of that sound, but but again, like every step is a step that direction. One thing too, I should mention, this album, I was reading up on this, it was a sleeper hit. And it didn't break right away in 1969. It broke like 6 months later after Deja Vu came out in 1970. After Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and that's an amazing album.
Yeah.
That album was a big sensation. Of course, Crosby, Stills, and Nash were already fairly big. And then, and so Neil Young, hitched himself to them. And that brought him to an even wider audience. And then people want back to this album, and then radio stations started playing like Down by the River and stuff and Cinnamon Girl, and the album like had a whole new life to it, and then it sold really well that summer, the summer of 70, so 1970. So even though this album came out like the prior year, so this is I didn't know that until now. Actually, I knew it was a hit, but I didn't realize it wasn't a hit until after Deja Vu dropped. And so everyone went back, listened to this album, and then that kind of launched his solo career. Yeah. And definitely. Yeah. I mean, Deja Vu is amazing too. And Helpless is really the song on Deja Vu, which also was on Decade. That's really like where he kind of gets the Harvest sound for the first time, the after Gold Rush country sound. So yeah, Round and Round still has a little bit of that hangover, that kind of Byrds-esque Buffalo Springfield electric clean. I would say clean electric kind of doing a country song. Right. That's what makes it a little different. But it's an amazing song. I love it. And if this is a mid-tier song on an album, it must be a pretty damn good album.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, what's your next?
My number 6 is Running Dry. So I said that. My number 5, Losing End. We're on number 5. The Losing End, as I said, it's for me, it's a fun song to play on guitar, and you can kind of mess around with it, have fun, do different vocal tracks. That was my experience with it. But it almost feels like it should be on like side 2 of Hawks and Doves or something like that. You know how that side 2 has that really quirky, it just feels like it's got that really, I don't know if you know Hawks and Doves, but
oh yeah, I know. Well, I love that album. It's pretty much straight country, the second song.
Exactly, yeah. So I just feel like it would fit better there. I mean, that came later, of course, but there's a lot of fun kind of country songs on that record, and it almost feels, again, it flows with the whole record, and it fits in nicely because, as Al said, it's an experience. A Neil Young record is meant to be played front to back. So, but it's just a fun country song,
Yeah.
And I think it could probably stand alone on its own as a country song. I don't know what kind of airplay it got, but it could. I don't know what the like how long it is. I'm just checking here.
It's rather short, I believe.
It's 4 minutes long. So
yeah, I could have heard that being a country single. I don't think they released it, but yeah, I think it could have crossed over.
Yeah. But
at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Around that time, exactly. So yeah, but Neil's full of surprises, right? So you never know what you're going to get, right? So like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
So there you go. Good song though. I enjoy it.
And in fact, on one of the archives, it stretched out to almost 6.5 minutes, with a little bit more of Ben Keith on the slide.
Okay.
On that song. It really does enhance it. Yeah. All right, Al, what's your number 5, buddy?
Number 5, I'm going with Round and Round. It won't be long. I think it was you Will, you were saying that it could have fit on the first album, or was it Eddie?
I think it was Eddie.
Okay. Yeah, Eddie mentioned that. Like, I mean, but reading up on this song, it was actually the oldest song. It was written back in the Buffalo Springfield days. Yeah. So that's probably why he gets that feeling, because it's got a bit of a little bit of an earlier composition that he wrote. So that's probably why he got that feeling where it could have belonged on his debut album. So it was written. It's the oldest song written on the album, and it was recorded live in the studio. Just them sitting around, a couple microphones, and the way albums were recorded back in the day, man. I mean, this is why these albums sound so great, in my opinion. Yeah, like now technology is like you can have 132 tracks, but to me, like it's the albums. You listen to modern albums nowadays, and it's just like. You could tell, like, let's dial up this drum sound. Let's dial up this. Nobody uses an actual studio as an instrument anymore. Like the old days. The studio itself, the room that you recorded in, is considered
atmosphere. Yeah, too.
It's the atmosphere of it could be considered an instrument. That you're using to record. The reverb, the things. How far you place the mic from an amp or a drum or whatever, and this song.
Jimmy Page pioneered that, and Mutt Lange on Back in Black, he was recording the ambient sound and in the studio. Yeah, it was all like that, and that's Neil Young specifically said with this album, because the first album, another thing I didn't mention, the first album was the same year. They both came out in 69. So one was early 69, one was later 69. Bands used to do that. Like Zeppelin did the first 2 albums in 1 year. Black Sabbath did 2 albums in 1 year. Like bands used to just knock out albums. But nowadays, it's like they have too many options and everything's digital, and they have they can just stick around for years.
It can take a week. It can take a week just to get a drum sound.
Where back then it was like you just go in there, you play, and you just knocked it out.
It was studio time too. Back in the day, they were paying. They were paying for a specific amount of time, so they had to get in, get the tracks done, record it. And in the early days, I was thinking back to like some of the early blues records that I have. They're all live to tape, off the floor.
Of course,
and you can hear it all. It's beautiful, and they sound amazing. You can hear the coughs. You can hear the ice cubes clinking in the glasses, and I have some old Albert King records that are like that. Yeah, exactly. So
there was no multi-tracking back then.
Exactly. And it's so much better though. It sounds so like the ambiance is there, like you said. It's beautiful.
A lot more atmosphere. Yeah, Neil said he felt the first album was a little like he overproduced it a little bit. He was because there's still that hangover from like the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper and stuff. Whereas with this album, this is like essentially his like back to roots album, like following that movement where he wanted to strip back. And he said that it was like him and Crazy Horse now, first time playing Crazy Horse. He just wanted to make it as stripped back as possible. So he was like consciously making this a more stripped back live sounding album than the first album, which is more of a produced studio affair.
Yeah. And they did almost just a take or two, most of these. And most of the time when they when he does record with Crazy Horse, they just press record and they just go.
Yep.
And then they go back to it and cut some out or whatever they have to do.
He was still recording like that in Zuma too. I always love the story. Like when he does Cortez the Killer, he had another verse, but he forgot to sing it. And the tape, there was a fuck up. Yeah, that's right. Like the tape stopped or something before he got to it. But he loved what he was doing, his solo so much because just listen to the song, you'll hear his solo. He was just like, you know what? We don't need that last verse. This is perfect as is. Like it was that kind of off the cuff decision. And it's funny because now I think that last verse is like poignant and perfect. And so who knows what he originally would have sang, but it's just like that kind of thinking. And even that's like, then by like 1976, he still has that approach of let's capture something that's real and visceral. And even if there's a mistake, if it's
magic,
let's just leave it in. Let's not try to make things perfect, like, hey, and that kind of, again, that begins with this album, that approach.
And that's what makes it so great. My next one, I think we're at number 5. This might be a little, this might be a little controversial. Y'all might throw things at me, but I'm going to go with Cinnamon Girl as my number 5. I love the live version a lot better than the version that's on here. And there's so many different versions that I've heard that I like better than this one. So this one is and also maybe I just have gotten burnt out of hearing Cinnamon Girl so much that I put out number 5 this time around.
I think that makes sense. There are a lot of versions, and some of those live electric versions sound amazing. I agree with you. Like I can think of like even the one on Weld sounds incredible. Like, and then there's I think he's done it on all the live records, if I'm not mistaken, with the horse. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of the early ones.
Right. Right, with a horse. It's
on like Rust. It's on Rust Never Sleep. Yeah, exactly. It was a staple song at that time, right, for those tours. So.
So okay, we're moving to 4 now. Yeah, I guess now we might be getting into some hits. Okay. I guess this is controversial too because it's another hit. And but Burned Out for me. Funny thing is though, I guess if I had to pick, Cinnamon Girl is definitely the song that gets played the most, or I've heard the most on classic rock radio. But this song in particular, I burned out. Because this was like my favorite Neil Young song when I was a teenager, and that's Down by the River. And I used to play it on guitar, and I had a band, so I used to play this song a lot. And so I burned it out a little bit. Like I did hear it on the radio sometimes too, this one, but I burned this out for me. So it lost a little bit of its impact. Although hearing it on vinyl again, it was very fresh, and God, the guitar works amazing. I actually hear a lot in the jamming here, a little bit. You hear a little bit of a Creedence influence. It definitely fits that vibe from that period. You know, it has that swampy kind of southern, like faux southern rock vibe, and the long, you know, Neil Young's long, vaguely psychedelic rock solos, but within a southern rock context, is very similar to what John Fogerty was doing, who also was the songwriter and lead guitarist. So there's definitely some, and they both liked wearing flannels, so both like proto grunge. That's another thing. Obviously, this album is like one of the first albums you would think of when people were referring to him as the godfather of grunge in the 90s. That's like how he was introduced to me. And, you know, I was a teenager into grunge music. So it was like, yeah, like Neil, he was like a contemporary artist. Like it felt like, like this, like even look at the album cover, him like by the tree and the flannel and like the aesthetic of the album. It's not like just the music itself is grungy, but it felt like, yeah, this feels like a legit guy. This feels like, yeah, I can. This sounds like the guy that would influence like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and all those kind of people. And so, and this, like, yeah, I mean, to me, this is a proto grunge album. So, and I consider, you know, grunge is metal. I know some metalheads like to pretend it's not, but it is. It used to be on Headbangers Ball. I mean, first time I saw it, Smells Like Teen Spirit was on Headbangers Ball. So like all that stuff, all that Seattle rock stuff is a subgroup of metal. So I'm just saying, in a sense, this album, you know, we talk about proto metal a lot. We talk about Deep Purple. We talk about Led Zeppelin, Blue Cheer, stuff like that. Well, why isn't this in the conversation? Especially when we get to one song, which we all know what, you know, I'm thinking about. But there's one song in particular. It's like, why is that not in the conversation about like late 60s, like proto metal? Yeah, no, definitely hard rock. There's no question about it. But yeah, one song in particular. But you know, Down by the River, it gets like, especially in that chorus, it's very hard rocking and it's electric. And I mean, I really connected with it as a teenager. It's long. It's fucking 9 minutes and 13 seconds. Yeah. It's an epic song. I love it. It's great. There's just 3 other songs I love even more now, but it's great. And this was a personal favorite of mine when I was a teenager. But now it's a higher mid-tier song on the album for me. But it's a classic, and I love it.
Yeah. Completely understand. Well, what are you going to go with?
Very good breakdown on that one, Eddie. I like that. My number 4, I guess we're on number 4. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. So for me, that song, I put it at like a 9 out of 10 when I did my initial rating. I love that song, and it speaks to me. There's a line in that, got to get out of this town, enough of this running around, something like that. You know, everybody knows This Is Nowhere. I remember listening to that as a young guy, and I was like, okay, this is very cool. It's still appealing. That line is still appealing today. You know, it doesn't matter where you are. Like that song just kind of jumps out. I love the lyrics. Eddie mentioned the cover, the feel of the record. It just speaks to the record. It's a gatefold, which I love. And it's back when albums were made for viewing and looking at it and getting to know the artist.
Yeah, even I mean the gatefold itself has that kind of alternative rock kind of aesthetic where it's just like kind of loose and legit. You're getting like a glimpse of something. A little like the Beastie Boys would have things like that, like just these intimate shots.
Exactly. And you're getting a feel for the artist and you know what he's like and the musicians. But no, it's just a good song. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. Actually, I want to show you guys something while we're on that point. I've got this bootleg, this Neil Young bootleg from 1970 mono. The sound is crap on this, but I recorded it. I'm being honest, but I EQ'd it a little bit. It's on my page. This is Neil with Crazy Horse, with Buffalo Springfield. There's a bunch of material on here from the very, very early days, all recorded.
And Danny Whitten is still Danny Whitten's still alive.
So. Exactly. So I had to get it just from like a collector's point of view. I thought it was a really good. Some good write up on the back here, and it talks about the band and this song. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere is on here, and it's one of the probably earliest live recordings of that song with Crazy Horse. And like I say, just play with the sound a little bit and put your headphones on. It sounds pretty tight. So it's a fun listen, but great song. I'll leave it there. And that's why I came in, where it is with my ranking. So We're getting into the good stuff now, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow.
My number 4 is Running Dry. I love the violin on there. It's very emotional. I mean, like even Neil's voice, dude. Like you could pick a number of tracks, man. I don't know. Whenever I listen to him, I just always he's one of those guys that you can like feel the emotion, like when he's singing. You know, it's not fake, man. You know, you can feel a real emotion, like, you know, in his vocal style. And I always liked his vocal style too, man. I remember reading something about like when he was on that Canadian version of remember when USA for Africa they did We Are the World. So Canada had
They did it. It was on the flip side.
Yeah, what was the Canadian one?
Oh, I forgot.
All right. So anyway, Canada had
talk about.
Canada had an equivalent of that, but I read an interview where, you know, Neil did a vocal track on there. He did a line and stuff, and I guess whoever was producing, I think the song was written by Bryan Adams actually, but I think when he was cutting his vocal track for that, somebody made a comment or something saying like, you know, he sings a bit flat or something, and Neil was like, dude, Neil was like in typical Neil fashion, was like, well, that's my style, man, you know? So, like, you know, I mean, the guy's real. It's not, you know, it doesn't fake it. He, you know, probably knows he doesn't have the greatest voice in the world, but I love his voice, man. I mean, you don't have to be technically an operatic singer to be great. You know what I mean? So
all you have to do with feel and if you believe it and all that.
If it strikes the emotion with you, man, I think you're doing the job. You know, and for me, you know, he does the job with that. And then going back to Running Dry, I like the guitar in it too. It's a very heavily reverbed like guitar in there, and which is a cool sound I always loved. Almost like, you know, you're kind of like almost like you're playing through a Leslie, but it's not a Leslie sound, but just very heavily reverbed. And the violin on there, beautiful violin. And I think it's a great song. I mean, we're getting into the nitty gritty now. We're getting into for me, you know, my ranking at least. So this is number 4 for me. So go ahead, Andy. You go ahead.
Yeah, my number 4 is going to be the title track, and I freaked out when it came out on that movie Almost Famous. I was like, oh my god, they're actually playing this song on Almost Famous because it kicks in with that rhythm and that little lead guitar, the way it starts, and it just reminds me of back home. You know, when he says, "Every time I go back home, it's cool and breezy. I wish I could be there right now, just passing time." You know, and I came from Corpus. You know, I lived in Corpus Christi for almost 16 years, and that's on the coast of South Texas. So, you know, I know exactly what he's talking about being out there in the breeze and just killing time, man. Not worrying about anything and just hanging out with some good time friends. So that's going to be my number 4. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere. It could be higher, but there's others that are better. But everybody knows that This Is Nowhere.
All right. Well, my number 3. Okay. Awesome song. One of the greatest classic rock songs ever written. Little bit of a burnout factor, but not as much as you would think. And yes, I am talking about Cinnamon Girl. Here we go. Cinnamon Girl. Cinnamon Girl's right. This is actually, even though I do love all those live versions, especially that, you know, live Rush version, this is still my favorite because of the Danny Whitten factor. Because this is the one where his vocals are most prominent. I mean, yeah, he's harmonizing throughout the whole album, but this is essentially a co-lead, you know?
That's true.
So Neil and Danny are doing this co-lead, and I just love Danny Whitten's voice. I also am a big fan. People should check out the Crazy Horse album from '71, which they actually did an album without Neil Young.
They did a couple, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but only one with Danny Whitten's.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Because he died in '72.
Okay.
And you would hear him. He also does co-lead on the song Downtown, which is a studio version on that actually '71 album. And then you would hear it on Tonight's the Night, a live version. Let's Go, Baby, Let's Go Downtown. And I always liked Danny Whitten's voice, you know, very similar, especially if you're into like the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner's.
It is Crazy
Oh,
Horse.
look at you, Andy. You actually got it on vinyl.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's hard to find, I think, too.
Yeah, I love it.
You know,
Yeah, great album. If you're into like Southern rock, if you love Leonard Skinner and early ZZ Top and Allman Brothers, definitely check out that album. It's great. And Danny sings most lead for most of the songs. So the other guys do come in for a few of the ones. And it's a strong album. So yeah, and I really like Danny's voice. It's really tragic what happened. And something too, Al was bringing up like the interplay, like, you know, even though I do love all the subsequent lineups, and Zuma is like one of my all-time favorite Neil Young albums, you know, I'd say that's my second favorite studio album. Tonight's my favorite studio album. Time Fades Away is my favorite overall. But as much as I love those later Crazy Horse lineups, as much as I love the Stray Gators, there was something going on, not just between their vocals, but the way Danny Winton's rhythm plays, and you would hear this a lot like on Down by the River and stuff, and the way Neil solos around it. Like I feel like the other rhythm guitarists that followed were a little more in the background, you know, whereas there's a little something more going on here where it's a little closer to like a Whitford Perry or Malcolm Angus, like, you know, or Keith, pick your solo guitars,
Right.
Stone. Like, yeah, like he's just a little more like he has these jagged rhythms, Danny, that Neil kind of dances and plays around, and there's like a real dance between their guitars that it's amazing, and it's like, yeah, even though Neil Young was so talented and he played with so many talented musicians that he obviously could carry on without Danny, but Danny was the real deal. He was a really talented guy, and this is like, you know, they played on a couple tracks on After the Gold Rush, but that's pretty much it. That and that one Crazy Horse album, or just live albums from this period, that's pretty much it. It was like a short-term thing. Like, you're not going to get a lot of Danny Winton and Neil Young. So, and Cinnamon Girl to me is like the ultimate Neil and Danny song in a lot of ways. So I will always love this version, and like the whole album sounds great on vinyl. It's a great song. It's a perfect rock and roll song. It's a hard rock song too. You know, I don't know if they used that term in 1969. But this is a hard rock song, you know?
Yep. And also, to talk a little bit more about Danny Winton, you know, we've all heard that song, I Don't Want to Talk About It, which is a Crazy Horse original, written by Danny Winton and sung by Danny Winton. You know, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think if Danny had lived, something might have happened. Crazy Horse might have not just been Neil Young and Crazy Horse, you know what I mean? Like it would look like he was like the Robbie Robinson from a songwriting standpoint too. Band, like a little bit like how the band emerged a bit out of Bob Dylan's shadow. You know, I feel like with Danny Winton that might have happened because Crazy Horse did release other albums, but you know they were never going to emerge out of Neil Young's shadow. But with Danny, maybe I could see them kind of catch, especially with the whole Southern rock stuff that would be going on a few years later. Skinner and all that stuff. I could see them, but then again, Danny was a Hellraiser and a heroin user, so
I mean,
it wasn't meant to be. But he had something there that I think like they could have emerged in their own right if he had lived, and I think they all knew that. That's why he was such a big presence. That's why Tonight is a tribute to him. He was a big presence. In the band with Neil Young. Who himself is a big presence. So
and Neil Young always references him like what could have been for that band, and I completely agree with you. I mean, they might have turned out to be like the band, gotten out of Neil Young's shadows. And Neil Young makes a little appearance on that debut album of Crazy Horse, but he didn't try to take it over or anything. He really wanted them to be a band on their own, but after Danny Winton passed, they still didn't do anything for a few more years until Tonight's the Night. That was another 3 years after this that they would convene back together. So it was a big blow to the band.
Yeah, it was a big blow. He was definitely the number 2 guy after Neil Young in the group. And that you could even hear on this album. Like Danny Winton is the second most important musician on this album.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's your next one?
Yeah, I was going to say, Al was asking about the Canadian version of We Are the World. It's Tears Are Not Enough.
That's it.
The Northern Lights. Yeah, I had to look that up. I forgot about that, but you're right.
You should know it's your homeland, Will.
I should, right? I should. I don't know what I was doing back then. Smoking a lot of dope, I guess. So listening to Neil Young, apparently. Yeah, my number 3, and this was tough because there's 2 monster tracks on this record. You guys know what they are. But I went with Down by the River, only because, and we'll get into the other one in a minute, but for me, it's such an epic song, clocking in over 9 minutes, but it's got that soft beginning, acoustic, soft, nice touch, and then bam, it just hits you in the face.
Yeah.
And, it just kicks ass from there. And then it doesn't stop. It goes on for like the next 8.5 minutes. It's just in your face, Crazy Horse. And I love it. And that's, if anything I can say about Crazy Horse, that's what they're known for. Just that they become an entity of themselves, it's just the energy and the synergy that happens with these guys. And like Al mentioned, them just jamming on stage. No effects, no lights, no nothing, just pure music, right? So they're just raw, right to the bone. I love it. That's just, they're so good. And I've seen Neil solo a number of times. I've seen him with Crazy Horse a number of times. I've seen him with the Blue Notes, probably with the Stray Gators, and just different bands and everything. But I always come back to the Horse. And if I really want to listen to something hard rock and powerful, it's Crazy Horse. I always tend to lean towards that. I love his solo work as well. I think he's a brilliant songwriter, storyteller, artist, musician, all of that, and singing. I love his singing too. But for me, the Horse, this is like just this is, if you hear Crazy Horse in the dictionary, if you look it up in the dictionary, you're going to see Down by the River listed as one of the top 10 songs of Crazy Horse. Something you have to. If somebody said, go listen to, introduce me to Crazy Horse, this would be on within the few songs that I would choose for sure. Yeah. It's an excellent song. So
yeah, you're right. It would start off with this one.
Yeah. It kicks ass, and like I said, I had to give it a 10 out of 10 overall. Like, it's just an amazing song, and it's just the way it punches you in the face a couple minutes in. I love that. So such a good bit of music there, because you're not expecting it. If you've never heard it, then all of a sudden it's a nice soft little bit, and then bam. It reminded me a bit of what Sabbath does with their softer acoustic and or classical electric pieces that Tony implements in between the harder tracks.
Yeah.
And I had a good interview of that with him, and he was talking about that, and he said, like our songs are dark and heavy. We want to give you a little bit of light in between, just to take your mind and bring your mind away from the heavy stuff before we introduce the next one, and I love that. So that's what this feels like to me.
Yeah, and definitely kind of the blueprint for like what you'd hear in the early 90s with Metallica, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, did the clean, electric, softer verses, but then the chorus where it's louder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Just kicks ass that way, and just a great song all around. So yeah, there you go. That's my number 3.
Ow.
Number 3, man, I'm going to go with the 10-minute epic, Cowgirl in the Sand. That's going to be my number 3. What an incredible song. There's 2 other ones that, honestly, these top 3 could be tied for 1, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just the way it is. But you got to rank them somehow. But, Cowgirl in the Sand. I love the way Neil just, like, it weaves in riffs here and there and changes up the song and changes the tempo and all that. It's just really, really cool, man. I mean, for a 10-minute song, he doesn't let it get boring. It's actually very it keeps it interesting and keeps your interest, and a lot of 10-minute songs should be meandering and boring, man, but I don't know. I don't feel that way about this one, and you to have long songs like that and keep the listener interested is a mark of a great songwriter, and Neil was just a masterful songwriter. I mean, he can hit you in the head, a 2.5-minute song, or he can go on a 10-minute epic and just be as potent. You know what I mean? So I'm going Cowgirl in the Sand, number 3. I love this song, man. It's just the bass line's really cool too. It just allows Neil to just fucking go off and do like all this stuff, and I think it's a smooth bass line for you musicians out there. Crazy Horse is a great musical band, dude. I mean, I gotta check out that Crazy Horse album, man, because I always read up on they had a few other albums, but that one with Danny Whitten, I gotta check that one out. You know, because I'd love to see how they were without Neil. You know, so
Yeah, that's definitely their strongest, in my opinion.
yeah, because Danny Whitten's on it. Yeah,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I mean, you definitely have to be like into Southern rock, but if you're into Southern rock, yeah, if you love like Skinner and stuff, yeah, definitely check it out. Yeah.
All right, that's my number 3, Andy. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, my number 3 is going to be Down by the River, is what I'm going to go with. It's a powerful track. It's just, I just like the way that the bass and the drums just come in after that little intro. That it just hits you so hard. It's so good, and the story, and I shot my baby, and his voice. Just he plays it out like this yearning and this passionate singing on this song, and I could have put it higher, but there's just 2 more songs that just stick out to me a lot more. So I'm gonna go with Down by the River.
Nice. All right, now this is my sleeper hit. I don't know if Will figured this out yet, but okay. Now this surprised me a little bit, but I gotta be honest. Like this is just how I was feeling the last couple times I've been listening to this album. And actually, Will touched upon some of the things I really love about this song. But yes, the title track, "Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere," is now my second favorite song from this album. Something I just really connected with the song this week, and I mean, I always liked it. I always thought it was a really great song. But like when I was younger, I would have put the 2 more famous Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River ahead of it. But now, I don't know. I gave this the edge. There's just a feeling to it. Short, it's sweet, it's perfect. It has that perfect blend of kind of a funky country rock song. Kind of reminds me. It makes sense when like Tonight's the Night's my favorite studio album for Neil Young. Because this almost sounds like a song that could have been on Tonight's the Night. Has that kind of lazy country rock vibe that song has, and even lyrically, that kind of bitter but kind of darkly humorous kind of lyrics that you would have a lot of that on like Tonight's the Night, a lot of like gallows humor and like like Albuquerque and songs like that. I don't know, this kind of fits that vibe, and I love the lyrics, and I don't know, maybe it's where I'm at in my life right now, but it just I really connected to the song. I love the melodies. To me, it's perfect. It's a perfect little gem of a country rock song, and it comes in perfect after Cinnamon Girl, and I love it. So it's one of my favorite Neil Young songs now. It's definitely a song that's grown on me a lot in the past couple weeks. So that's my second favorite song.
Dude, that's crazy that you say something like that, because Neil Young hits you in different parts of your life.
Oh yeah, believe me. Homegrown came out right when he finally released it officially. Yep. Like right when I was like separating from my wife. Oh, wow. So it's like things like, hey, I was like, thanks, Neil. You made me feel like I wasn't alone. Like that's why he decided to finally release the album. It had to be in 2020 when you were separated. It was perfect. I need it. Like, Bob Dylan already did Blood on the Tracks. I needed my new blood on the tracks.
Well, I know that you're a big-time Dylan fan, so you have to hear something that was a little bit more fresher that covers the same kind of ground.
Yeah, I don't really heard Blood on Tracks so much. Believe me, I was listening to that too. And like Marvin Gaye's Here, My Dear, and like all those, and Willie Nelson's Phases and Stages, which we did on your show. Yeah. It was nice to get a divorce album that I hadn't played to death yet. So that was great.
Really have a woman's point of view too on that album. Having Kate on there and giving her point of view.
That's a great episode. Yeah. Everyone should check that out. So hey, and if you like Neil Young, you might like Willie Nelson. Check it out. Watch that episode.
That's true. I haven't watched that. I'll have to watch that with you guys.
I think did I wear my cowboy hat in that one?
Yeah, you did for a while.
Yeah.
You took it on and off.
But you know what? It's funny. Sorry, Eddie. Yeah. I was gonna say, Eddie, you mentioned Tonight's the Night. I love that record. I had it on cassette, and I remember being in my first apartment, and I had no money at all, but I had that cassette. So if I hear anything from that album now, I'm right back to where I was at that time, right? So
yeah, it brings that back.
Such a classic record. Yeah.
it feel like just like I don't know, like if you've spent much time in America, Will, but it's just like driving across America and hitting little diners and road stops, like you're driving through the desert. Like it just has that vibe.
It's a road trip record for sure. Absolutely. And I mean, if you're, I wouldn't recommend it. Again, very depressing record, and we know why, because of the subject matter and everything Neil and the guys were going through and all the losses and stuff. But it's just, and the, combined with drug use, depression, and just the whole thing. It's just it's a dark, beautiful thing, that record. I love it. It's
you'll like all the stuff I have to say about. Watch my video. I'll send you a link afterwards.
Please send me your page, for sure.
Yeah. I talk about that album like probably the most out of all the albums.
Yeah, curious to hear your take on the whole Ditch trilogy. Being outdated in that sense, and it kind of got a bad rap in that sense. Like people, listen, Neil went off.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like the opposite. As soon as I
exactly,
I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I want to go in the Ditch."
Yeah, exactly. As he said before, more interesting people in the Ditch than on the mainstream. Right?
Yeah, I think it was actually a selling point. It's just more like you go watch video. I'll explain why I'm against calling it a Ditch trilogy. But if anything, I mean, I have a lot of reasons, but still. It's a cool term. I get it. I mean, really, everything Neil Young's done is kind of a ditch, though, because he's always just done whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah,
he's kind of like that line on Rust Never Sleeps, where he says, "Meet the losers in the best bars.
Yeah,
and meet the best people in the dives."
Yeah, exactly. No, and even
Night is a late night album.
Oh, it is.
At 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. Oof.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's what I'm saying. Like, at that time, all I had was I had a little bit of hash and a little bit of maybe beer if I could afford a six pack at that time. After I paid, I didn't have any money. It was in my first apartment, and so I'd buy food and buy whatever, and then I'd listen to that record all night. It was great. I'd watch Star Trek and listen to that record and a couple other cassettes. So that was my entertainment, man. So
I'm imagining it right now.
You make it much younger, Will. Let me tell you. I was going to say, time fades away. That's a beautiful train wreck, also.
Oh, I love it.
I love that record. Yeah.
That's my favorite overall. There's just something so perfect about that album. It's just, I mean, that's just pure rock and roll, and it's everything I love about Neil Young. Even that's not with Crazy Horse, it's with the Stray Gators, but he creates a similar magic, it's just that rawness.
It's live. It's a live album.
Well, and talk about proto grunge. I mean, you got Last Dance. To me, is like that's of all his proto grunge songs, Last Dance is like the most proto grunge. Like that's right there. Like that could be released in '93, and that would have knocked your socks off.
But there was a lot of shit going on in that tour. I was reading an article about it, and they were having a lot of problems with the band some band members.
Yeah, and Neil himself, he was partying a lot. He's a young man. He's in a rock and roll band.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny that y'all mentioned this, because that's what started this whole having this episode, was that I saw Eddie had played that album, and I had commented, and then we started going back and forth.
Yeah.
And he had asked if we've ever done an episode of Everybody Knows Is Nowhere. I said, well, how do you want to do it? He said, any way you want. So that's how we came up with this, was because Time Fades Away.
I got that 50th anniversary new vinyl that came out. It was great. Even has a bonus track. So I got that. Yeah, so that's when we start talking about it. It was perfect because I just had finished making the video, but my video does not discuss, like I said, I mentioned this album in passing, but it doesn't fall under the era that I was focusing on, which is just the Ditch, like mid-70s era. So, but I was in the mood because I had just gotten this vinyl. So it was just like, I kind of feel like talking about this album too. So it was perfect. And I want to take a break. I'm taking a break from making videos for like a month or two to focus on some other stuff. So in the meantime, this was perfect, Andy. I got to talk about Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere.
And in fact, Will and I and Al have made our own videos of Neil Young's 70s, 80s, and Al joined us for 90s, and we need to continue.
Oh yeah, anytime you do a Neil Young thing, hey, consider me one of your Neil Young guys. I want to be one of your go-to guys.
Yeah, because
those are a lot of fun. Those
dozen albums.
I dug the '90s albums one, man. It made me go back and listen to his '90s output.
Yeah.
Still fucking putting out great stuff, man. You know, it was unbelievable. You know,
it really is. From this is '69, and you try to think about anybody else that tried to stay relevant or good almost 20 or 30 years later. Well, Neil did, and he still is.
Yeah.
It's just
and look at the output he's got in the vaults that he's pumping out now. Like you mentioned the archive stuff earlier. I'm just amazed at the amount of material that he's got to release, and then every now and then he goes and records something new and puts it out. Like it's crazy. You know, I can't keep up. My budget can't keep up with the output. Honestly, you know, no, it's crazy. I gotta say, and I think the more recent archive release, and I'm not sure which one it is, but it has a copy of Live Weld. It's Ragged Glory. I think that's the most recent one, if I'm not mistaken. I want that because Weld. I have Arc on CD. I have Weld on CD.
Yeah.
I have Ragged Glory on CD and vinyl. Sounds beautiful. But Weld is the one record I've never been able to find, like for a decent price. Very, very hard to find.
Does it have Arc on it? Because I don't have Arc. I can't find Arc anywhere.
Yeah, Arc, you know, from a collector's point of view, Arc is an interesting thing, but it's 45 minutes of distortion and clips and reverb. And reverb and tiny little jams, like very short little jams where I wouldn't even consider them songs. I wouldn't even consider them outtakes, really. I don't know if it would be worth having on vinyl, but if it comes with a box set, so what? You know, that's okay. Yeah.
I want on CD or anything really, because I really want that. All right, Al, you're at number 2, right?
Yeah, number 2, man. I'm going with the epic "Down by the River." Incredible song. I had a coworker, man. I used to work with back. Oh shit, man! It's going back almost 20 years ago already. He was from Guyana, but he was a surveyor. We worked together, and he was one time he was like saying, "Hey, man," like because he knew like I had a lot of CDs and I loved music and everything like that. So he was like, "Hey, man, you have anything with Down by the River by Neil Young?" And I'm like, yeah, you know. So the next day I came in, and in the work truck we had a CD player, so I bought Decade with me because it's on Decade, and he wanted to hear that song, man, and we put it on, and he would just fucking be like jamming to it, man, like just like this guitar song. He's like, "This is my favorite Neil Young song," and everything. He said it used to get played a lot on radio down in Guyana, which is in you know South America. So it's you know, he said it was a radio staple down there. And I'm like, oh, all right. So it's funny to get like different perspectives from like different parts of the world. Like what was a hit, you know, here, there, you know, like Europe and Australia. I mean, it's a very different perspectives, man. And charts were a lot different. Everything, you know. I mean, what might have been considered you know, not a big hit here, could have been a big hit in another country. And he said, like, yeah, that song got played, you know, a lot, you know, and I guess radio has a bit more of a free form, you know, where it was free form radio. I mean, it was like, you know, you could play 10, 15, 20-minute tracks, you know, on the radio and, you know, piss break songs, as they would call it, you know what I mean? And this is probably definitely one of them where like a DJ would probably throw this on, you know, go to the bathroom, do their business and, you know, come back and the song's still playing. So, but I mean, the guitar solo is just so fucking epic, you know. And Eddie touched on it before. It does have that kind of that Creedence kind of vibe to it. And I you know, him saying that, I hear it now. You know, I can definitely hear that. And so I mean, I love the song, man. I mean, it's not number 2. I mean, there's one that even though we'll get to it, but you know, it's my number 1. But this is my number 2, Down by the River.
Yeah, you talk about these longer songs. You reminded me of back when Rush used to play Bravado, and everybody would get up and leave and go get beers and go to the bathroom and stuff. And I'm like, "Where are you going? This is a great song, you know."
Yeah.
These longer pieces, but walking out on that song with Neil, like, oh my god, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
You know, like, no, I want to see it.
we all started with Decade, and I was very familiar with Cinnamon Girl and Down by the River, and Cowgirl in the Sand.
Yeah.
But when I got this album, and the first time I heard it all the way through, I flipped it, and I heard that sound and said, I went into town to see you yesterday, but you were not home. So I talked to some old friends for a while before I wandered off alone. Love the Losing End. I think it's fantastic. It's that melancholy. It's that feeling that we've all gone through before. It's that yearning and that want and that feel that we have as young men. We've all been through that before. And he just writes it so beautifully. A couple of, when they get into that guitar solo, it's like, man, this just feels so right. A little bit kind of turns me off the first time I heard it when he went yuck yuck, and then he goes into that solo.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell is that?
What is that?
But it's kind of endearing,
But it
So
works. Yeah.
and so that's going to be my number 2 is The Losing End. When I first heard this album, it just stuck out to me. That deep track that every rock fan loves deep tracks because we listen to albums from beginning to end, and sometimes when you do that, well, not sometimes, but when you do that, you're gonna hear a song that you think that it was made only for you, and you're the only one that loves this song, and that's how I felt about The Losing End, which of course a lot of people love it, but you got that feel that, man, this is my track. So The Losing End is my number 2. All right, guys, we are down to our favorite track.
Hang on, we missed my number 2, but I'll do my 2 quick.
I'm sorry.
Figured out. No, that's okay. We were talking. It's all good. I forgot too. So my number 2 is Cowgirl in the Sand. I gave it a 10 out of 10. Classic song. Just that opening riff. It was so hard for me between that and Down by the River, because I kind of matched the two together, and I was like, oh, this is. I gave them both 10 out of 10s because they're perfect Crazy Horse songs, So, but just the Cowgirl in the Sand, it's probably maybe a little bit more airplay and a little bit more. I'm just burnt out on it a little bit, even though it's got that amazing and like so many live versions that I've heard. Just doesn't matter what version, whether it's studio or live, that opening riff, you know where you are exactly. You just can't wait for it to kick off because you know you're in for a ride. So, that's a sum up number 2 with that. So,
oh well,
go for it.
I'm so sorry I skipped your number 2.
No, that's okay. We were chatting, and then Eddie and I got talking about Tonight's the Night, and it went from there. So it's all good.
Hey, well, that's
Reform, like the guitar solo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's the way it goes here in Black Spinner. We just talk and talk and talk.
We roll.
Well, this makes a really good segue to my number 1 because your number 2 is my number 1. Yeah, I'm if we're going with the epics, I'm a Cowgirl in the Sand guy. Yeah, I mean it's amazing. It's one of the greatest Neil Young songs. It's still, to me, this song still has a lot of power. It's fresh. Al brought up the great bass line. To me, this is Billy Talbot's shining moment on this album. I mean, it's great throughout the album, but that bass line, great, very doomy. Reminds me a little of stuff like Geezer Butler would be doing. Like, this song's a little doomy, even. Like I said, this is the song. I'm sure you all knew what I was talking about when I said if there's one song that's a little proto metal almost.
Oh, yeah.
It's Cowgirl in the Sand. This song's, I mean, yeah, I mean, you say grunge, but again, like, to me, grunge is like grunge metal. Like, this is 69. This is even before. This is before Sabbath's first album. And listen to this track. Like, the only thing, you had Led Zeppelin 2 with like Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown. And before that, Hendrix, some stuff Hendrix was doing, Beatles, like, Helter Skelter. But this, to me, like, Cowgirl in the Sand should be part of that conversation. If people want to go and look at like the evolution of rock music and hard rock and how it leads to like what people refer to that kind of late 60s, early 70s proto metal period, Cowgirl in the Sand is like, should be part of that conversation, I think. I mean, it's a very dark, metallic song. Like Down by the River is definitely hard rocking, but there's still kind of that rootsy kind of country, southern rock kind of vibe to it. Whereas Cowgirl in the Sand is something a little starker, more modern sounding for its time. It's like, and I think that's what gave it an edge for me. I mean, this darkness to it, and it's rich and just like, yeah, I mean, even though it's over 10 minutes long, just don't get bored. And I get bored with a lot of shit that's too long in music, you know. I'm not normally, I normally actually, if anything, I kind of like shorter songs. But this is a little like, I'm also a Sonic Youth fan, and you know, I like a lot of jazz. So I like if the playing is adventurous enough,
Yeah.
you stay interested. And that's the thing. Like, it's not boring because Neil is just doing all this really interesting stuff on the guitar. So and just like the sound and the tonality and the way he, you know, just like hits certain notes a certain way, it always seems exciting and like a revelation of something that's happening. It flies by. Like, it doesn't feel like it's an over 10-minute long song, in my opinion. And it's great. It's one of his great songs, and it's a very, especially for 1969, very, very ahead of its time track. And and you know, he would do some stuff like this again, you know, on like, you know, Time Fades Away and Zuma, but you know, and Rust Never Sleeps, like, you know, but this is like right here. This is why he's the godfather of grunge. Fucking shit like this, and it's a masterpiece. I love it. It's great.
It's a great track.
Yeah.
Well, what's your number one on this album?
Well, I had to go with the classic hit, Cinnamon Girl. I've got the 45 too.
Oh, that's nice.
And for me, I put it as my number one. It's just a really good rock song. It's a short, it's a hit, you know, it's a Crazy Horse hit. And it's spanned the time, you know, the times, in the sense you still hear it today. You can hear it live. You know, I love the studio version, obviously. I love the live versions even more, but it's just a classic rock song for me. And it's been around for what, 50 years? So, yeah, 69. So, you know, and it's still being played today. That amazes me. So it's just, it's a great feel, has a great feel. It's an excellent song, cool little story on it, you know. Pa sent me money, and, you know, it's just a really good tune. So I enjoy it that much, and that's why it's my number one.
Yeah, it's a great 3-minute punch.
Yeah, exactly.
That track, you know, just like Paranoid gives you that punch, or Communication Breakdown gives you that punch.
Yes.
So does Cinnamon Girl.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
it's one of his enduring tracks ever.
Yeah, I like the way. The other thing I'll say is that I think it's a great opener for the record.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
It's short, it's sweet, it's a rocker.
Oh, with a hand
It's
clap.
Crazy Horse. Yeah, exactly. And it's in your face right away. So you're getting a good taste of what's to come with the record, and I think it just flows. It could even be a great B-side opening track, but it works better on the A side, you know?
The A side,
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
To it all.
Yeah, exactly. It just gave it. I think if it had been a B-side, it wouldn't have probably had the success, you know, depending on what the format of the record was. So it's an excellent song, and it's a staple live too. I mean, he's been playing it for, you know, acoustically, electric. I don't know if he's ever done it on piano. That's a good question. That is a good question. I don't know. You never know. Okay. I'm sorry, Andy. I missed that.
Oh no. Who knows? Because
Yeah.
he says so many different versions of so many different songs.
Yeah.
Piano or pump organ or
Yeah. Exactly. The organ, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I watched him one tour do Tonight's the Night, acoustically, electric, and on piano, on the organ. Yeah, and it was pretty impressive to see him do that all on the same show.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Neil. That's Neil, right? Like, that's seeing him live. You guys know that's he kind of goes with his soul in that sense. So
Yeah.
I've seen him several times, but that was for the Lanois tour.
Yeah.
It was just him with a guitar, but it wasn't acoustic. It was his electric guitar with no.
So he was So he was mimicking that album where it was just like the loud, distorted guitar. Cool.
Yeah, he did like Ohio, and he did all these classics with just that guitar. It was just the stage was just a guitar, an amp, and a mic. And that was it.
And it was a really good sound. Like, Lanois was a good record. There's a lot of.
I like that album. The first time you heard Hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. And I don't think he played Old Black on that, did he? He played a Gibson or something that like there was.
Yeah, it wasn't Old Black. It was
No.
a different guitar.
Yeah, it was a different guitar and it had a really good, clean, distorted kind of Neil sound to it. So it was good.
Yeah, it was
Cool.
amazing.
Yeah. So, Al, you're next. What's
Al,
number
what's your
one?
number one, buddy?
Cinnamon Girl, man. I mean, this is a staple of, I heard this growing up on radio as a kid, and it's a great track, man. It's stood the test of time. I just love the co-vocal he does with Danny on this. I mean, just the two of them singing simultaneously. One of the greatest one-note guitar solos.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing one note throughout the whole thing, and it's just it hits you as much as somebody that's playing 1,000 notes. I mean, he did, you could do what he could do with one note was incredible, So, so Cinnamon Girl, man, I got to go with that one. And props to Typo Negative, man, for their cover of it. They completely redid, twisted it, and did their own thing with it. So, yeah, Cinnamon Girl, man, that's my number one.
Yeah, it freaked me out the first time I saw Typo Negative, and they did Cinnamon Girl. I was like, "Oh my God, are these guys for real? This is awesome," But my number one is going to be, Cowgirl on the Sand. And now that Edwin talks about it that way, with the bass and the drum, that heaviness, that bottom side of it, and it's a fantastic song. And we talked that it's over 10 minutes long and it doesn't feel that way. Well, because there's a verse, a great solo, another verse, another great solo, and it ends with a short verse, and it fades out. And what a perfect way to start an album with Cinnamon Girl. What a great way to end it.
Yep.
With this one. And there's so many different versions of the song. I've heard it 18 minutes long. I've heard it in a 2-minute acoustic set, and I've got a couple of bootlegs of his where Cowgirl on the Sand is done acoustically, and he just tells this, he just sings the vocals to it, and it's just as good. But nothing is better than this version.
I've heard those versions, Andy, and the acoustic, but the songwriting combined with the vocals, it's powerful. Yes. Yeah. But it's different from obviously the horse, Yeah.
It's still you can still feel it, but not like you do here. Not like the original version where you can just you can vision the lyrics, but man, you jam so heavy on it. So my number one is Cowgirl on the Sand. All right, that's our show. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And Eddie, I will take you up on that the next time we do a Neil show. You will be on it.
Cheers, me.
Cheers, man.
Definitely. Yeah, and Will, are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. I sent you a friend request.
Okay, I'll accept it. Yeah, I'll send you a link to my Neil Young videos.
Okay, I'll do the same thing for sure. I'll send you my.
Yeah, and I'll check out. Let's see. So you got your Rush podcast and
Rush podcast. I got a Rush group. I've got a music group. I got too much going on, but
I'll check it out.
My YouTube page is Will's Rush page also, but there's lots of other stuff in there, mostly Lionel Burns and a few videos and stuff.
Cool. I'll definitely check it out. And Andy, anytime you do Neil Young, definitely hit me up because I can hear I'm a huge fan. And hey, Al, did you get those Busch Garden tickets?
Yes. Yeah, I got
them. Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
So there you go. You got hooked up both things, TSO and Busch Gardens.
Yeah, man.
I know. It was looking like you might not get either, and then you ended up getting both. I put in the work to make sure you got that shit.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you. It.
Right. Have fun. Like you and your daughter should have fun times.
Yeah. Well, since we're still on a Neil Young kick here, a while ago, somebody sent me this album. It's On the Beach.
One of my favorites. Love it.
So it's a really nice.
I don't actually. That's like one of the few Neil Young albums I don't have on vinyl. I'm gonna change that this week. I'm gonna buy it this week.
So I haven't even spun this yet, but I gotta listen to this one. But it's very nice copy of it. So
Have you ever listened to the album before?
yeah, I've listened to the album.
Oh,
I just
okay.
haven't. I've never
Okay.
spun this vinyl version yet. So
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's
I mean,
one of
Neil
my
Young and vinyl go together because he's all about analog.
He sounds so great. It's about, most 70s rock sounds great on vinyl. It was like peak of analog recording, so it makes
because
sense.
it was recorded for it. You know,
Yeah,
really.
all that stuff. Pink Floyd, Zeppelin,
Yeah.
early Rush, all that stuff sounds amazing on vinyl. Sabbath, Neil Young, like they all. Aerosmith sounds great on vinyl. All that stuff sounds really amazing. But yeah, on the beach, I feel like an asshole for not having that on vinyl. I should have that.
I don't know. Don't feel bad. I don't have it either. I got it on CD.
Now I'm gonna go buy it right now, Al.
That's my
Sorry,
number
man.
album of 1974.
It's up there. It's one of my favorites. It's in my top 5. I love that album.
Yeah.
Revolution Blues.
Revolution Blues.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that song.
He does a wicked version on the beach on the live version with Promise of the Real on Noise and Flowers. I don't know if you heard that. That's amazing.
There's a
That's
great
a great
version
record.
on the archives too of On the
Oh
Beach.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's really good.
Yeah. Cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you see Neil Young when he played with Booker T and the MGs as well? Because I know he toured with them.
Yeah.
I wasn't really crazy about that album.
Yeah.
I wasn't either, but that was a Blue Notes.
That was the Blue Notes
Before you
tour.
passed me.
Yeah. That was the Blue Notes, I think. No, I did see that. I saw it wasn't the Straight Gators. It was the Booker T. It must have been Booker T. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been like the early O's.
Yeah. That was about the right time. Yeah.
Because I know he toured with them too. I remember that, but I didn't go see it. But I remember he toured with them. So
it was a good tour actually. I was really into the Blue Note stuff when it came out. I really liked it. Power swing, we called it power swing, power jazz type stuff. But there's I think one of his archive releases has a live show of that material in a bar, and it's amazing. I think my audio is
you're echoing now. But anyway, I think we're all echoing now.
That's it. I guess that's it. We should wrap up. Quit while we're ahead. All right. Thank you again, Andy.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. Not very nice. It was a real pleasure meeting you, Will. Always a pleasure, Al. You know, you and Al, Andy and Al, you guys got a good thing going. You should keep doing this. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, Al, do we know what we're gonna do next week?
No, I'm still brainstorming. I will get you an idea tomorrow. And we'll work on it.
All right.
All right. A lot of fun, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being on, and see you next time, man.
See you next time. Later, dudes.
Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Later.
Bye.